If you're a writer, one piece of advice you've probably heard over and over is don't worry about structure, just write. And that piece of advice could be costing you money, and it could be the reason why your book never gets finished. And even if you finish, it can create major frustration with your editors and cost you a lot more money for the book's production. I'm Kathy Sanders with Harbor Light Content Group, and after working with authors and productions on over 500 books, I have seen firsthand how the writing process can affect everything that comes afterward. So this approach that I'm talking about, sometimes referred to as the brain dump, or some people might say vomiting on the page, it may help you get your feelings out. And don't get me wrong, this type of approach might be helpful for therapy. It could be helpful for journaling or brainstorming or sometimes other types of writing. But if you approach your manuscript this way, you may end up with tens of thousands of words and no clear path for your readers to follow. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to write with enough structure to finish your book, communicate your message properly, and give your production team the strongest manuscript possible. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we're putting videos out on a regular basis to help writers and authors understand the publishing industry and to understand writing and AI and all of these different topics. So go ahead and subscribe. You don't want to miss anything that we're putting out. So the first thing that we want to talk about is to know the destination, where you're going. And I want you to answer two specific questions about your book. Who am I writing this book for, and what do I want the reader to take away from it? So when we're talking about who am I writing this book for, who is your target reader is the statement that you're going to hear a lot. In marketing, they talk about an avatar, having, like, you're putting together a picture of this person who is like the example of what your target audience looks like. And you need to be really specific about this. We'll get into this in more depth in other videos, but just for a basic thing here, pick the gender, pick a 10-year span of who this person is that you're writing to. Is it women between the ages of 30 and 40? Let's just say that as an example. And that is, get in your mind a picture of this person that you're writing to. And that's going to really help you as you're writing your book to get a clear focus of what that person's going to be able to take away from your writing. And then another thing, what do you want them to take away? What is the message? What is the ultimate goal? If you're teaching something through your book, what is it you want them to do differently when they put your book down? If it's a fiction book, what lessons have your characters walked through in their journey and in their character arc that you want your reader to kind of take away and learn from your characters? And here we know if you don't know your destination, your reader's not going to know it either. They're not going to take anything away from it. The thing about not being organized is you're going to go down bunny trails. Every time you turn around, you're going to be writing things in your book and you'll think of more things to put in that book. And the problem with that is sometimes those thoughts and those ideas are great things to write. They may not belong in that book. So I would suggest keeping a file, keeping a log. And then when you get an idea, if it doesn't really fit into this book that you're writing right now, put it in a log for another book. Because the great thing about writers is they keep writing. You're going to write another book most likely. So put those ideas down in another place. Don't try to shove it into this book and make it work, because most of the time it's not going to. So the next thing I want to bring to your attention is that a brain dump is raw material. And I've coached a lot of authors over the years. I've heard many of them say, oh, I had this writing coach and they just said, write, just get everything out, vomit on the page, get it all out there. The problem with that is that now you've just got a whole conglomerate mess. I mean, not to be gross, but like if you threw up on your kitchen floor, it's going to take you a while to clean that all up. It's going to be a mess. And do you want to deal with it? No. So my suggestion is to be organized from the beginning. I'm going to talk to you a little bit later in this video about how you can do that practically. But I've seen people close to me write this and they have 80,000 words or 50,000 words for their book, but there's no organization. Now they have to go back and be almost like a surgeon and trying to put this piece and extract it from this part and put it over here where it really belongs. And then now they're trying to fit it over here where they didn't write that section to include that part to begin with. So now they have to do all of this, and it can get really messy really quick. When you start the book with a basic structure, you're going to be able to move your reader from point A to point Z, and you're going to have some changes along the way, but they're going to be minor adjustments. They're not going to be major overhauls. And you're most likely to move your reader along that progression of where you want to take them if you're not starting with super raw material like that. So the next thing I want to talk to you about, and most of the videos that you've watched about how to write, they're probably not able to take it from this perspective, but I am a publisher. We have published so many books. I'm a project manager with a company still. So I am the one who oversees all of these projects, from getting the book manuscript in for a quote and then all the way through the process through the release date. So here's what this does when you have this type of writing style and you just write, you brain dump everything out, and then you submit that manuscript for publishing. If that's what you do and you don't really make a lot of changes, you don't structure it, this is what it's going to do to your editors. Because if you're professionally publishing a book, you should have two different type of edits. You're going to have a content edit, sometimes it's called developmental edit, and a copy edit. I like to explain editing this way. So let's say that you want to redo your kitchen. The developmental edit, the content edit, is the person that comes in and they tear out the old structure. They take up all the flooring and they put in all the new appliances and they put all the stuff back. Now it looks a lot better. It's been restructured. It's got a better flow to it and things like that, but there's still sawdust everywhere. There's still all kind of mess every place. The copy editor is the one who comes behind and they make sure all the grammar and the everything is consistent. The capitalization, everything's according to the Chicago Manual of Style. Of course, both editors are looking at that, but the developmental editor is doing the heavy lifting with fixing like any type of, tense issues throughout the book, of trying to make sure this chapter flows with the next one, or does this chapter need to move somewhere else, or is this paragraph better as an intro for this chapter? There's no ending here. How are we going to end this chapter? And things like that. Bigger issues than just making sure that things are properly spelled and that the punctuation is correct and things like that, like the copy editor does. When you have a book that's been a brain dump and you haven't been able to be really structured while you're writing it, your editors are going to be doing and focusing on things that they shouldn't have to, because they're going to be cleaning up and making sense of all your thoughts and making it more organized for you. Well, that means that they're not focusing on the deeper issues that they're supposed to be, that you're paying them to do: the strength of your message, the progression of your ideas, missing information, pacing, consistency, reader's experience, all of those things that editors focus on. Citations, if you're quoting things, and maybe they're so focused on trying to fix all of your organizational issues that maybe now there's some citations that they overlooked because they didn't realize that, oh, that wasn't in their voice, but they didn't footnote it properly. So now we got to figure out what source that came from. That might get completely overlooked because the structure was so missing. And depending on how your editor charges, they might charge you extra time for that, because they might go, this goes beyond what I was paid for initially as a content editor, as a developmental editor. This almost crosses into ghostwriting, because now I have to fix all of your structural issues. I've got to fix all of this. It's not really written right because it was just a brain dump. So you've got to think about that. The editor and your entire production team may need more time. It may cost more money to develop the book and get it going in the right direction, because you handed them a manuscript that wasn't very organized to begin with. Doing more intentional work up front before you submit it to publishing, before you submit it to editors, it's going to save time, money, and frustration. So let's talk about now what you should do instead. And I mentioned this earlier, but we're going to go into more depth now. So first, we're going to talk about identifying your target reader. A lot of people come to us and we say, okay, who's your book for? And they go, oh, it's for everyone. And you may have even said this yourself, my book's for everyone. Okay, so it's for the 3-year-old down there who's just going to chew on it. Well, no, it's not for them. Well, it's not for everyone then. It's for the 96-year-old grandma who's knitting over in the chair and her eyes are bad, so she can't even read. No, it's not for her. Okay, so who is your book for? Narrow it down. What is that person asking? What problems are they facing? What do they need to get from your book that's going to help them with whatever problem it is that you're solving? So who is this person that is going to benefit and needs this book, this story the most? Picture them while you're writing. And then the next thing you want to do is to write down the primary goal of your book in a couple of different ways. First of all, I want you to take your whole book and write it in a paragraph, less than 250 words. And then from there, I want you to take that down into one sentence and explain what your whole book is about in one sentence. And then take it down. Some people say one word. And if you can do one word, summarize your book in one word, do it. If you can't do it in one word, how about a phrase, 4 or 5 words? I'll let you do that. Sometimes people have a hard time even getting it down to a paragraph, but that exercise is going to help you get a lot clearer on what your overall message is and what you want your reader to take away from the book. Because if you're not ready to explain the purpose of your book yet, then you're probably not ready to organize it into chapters and in a progression. So get really clear on what the message of your book is, and that's going to help you move along to the next phase, which is organizing the book into chapters and give every chapter a purpose. I'll write a little summary for every chapter and where I want it to go, what plot lines are being developed in that chapter, what are the characters that are involved, what are they saying, what's really happening in this chapter. And that's makes it easy to go back and write it. And this will change. As you write the book, you realize this needs to happen, or, oh, I didn't talk about this yet. And even in nonfiction, you can take your readers through a progression and that makes sense. It's logical. So having the little snapshot, and maybe it's not a summary like a paragraph, but just having some bullet points. What do you want to talk about in this chapter? And that's going to help you stay super focused as you're writing. It's going to help you keep really clear on your overall goal and the progression of the book. It's going to eliminate you from going off onto bunny trails and writing things in there, shoving ideas in that don't belong. You're going to put that in another file. Oh, I'm writing this book about this storyline. Wouldn't it be really cool if, okay, stop right there. Does it fit in this storyline? If not, I've got tons of files with just ideas for a later time. And I know those are going to be cool books on their own, but if I tried to shove them in the book I was writing at the time, it would never have worked. So anyways, this is something you call an idea parking lot. When you think of something that doesn't belong in the chapter, doesn't belong in the book, put it over there instead of forcing it into the manuscript. So you're not throwing that idea away, you're saving it for later, but you don't want to forget about it either. So you want to put it somewhere. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is setting deadlines. And right now I'm working with about 5 different clients that I'm coaching with some author coaching or some writer coaching. I think all of them recently, I have had to tell them, you need to set a deadline. There's a few of them who are just kind of procrastinating and they hadn't really set a hard, fast deadline when they wanted to get their manuscript done. Because what happens if you don't do that, everything else in the whole world's going to come up and steal that time away. You're going to have this problem arise and you're going to go on that trip and you're going to have all of these things happen. And oh man, the last thing you're going to remember to do is write your book unless you're really intentional about it. So what you need to do is set some deadlines and make it realistic. Set a deadline for the entire book. For instance, if you said, okay, by the end of March, I want to have my whole book written, figure out how many chapters you're going to have and say, I'm going to target this many words with this many chapters. And if you know that information up front, then you can kind of work backwards and you can say, okay, how many chapters do I need to write per week or per month if you're giving yourself a long time frame? How many words do I need to write every week? I learned this by doing the November writing challenge. I can't even remember the name of it. Put in the comments if you remember what that was. Maybe you've done it yourself. Leave a comment. Tell me about your experience with that November writing challenge. This is specifically for fiction, I believe, writing 50,000 words in 1 month. And at that point, I had written what at the time I'm revising my first novel right now. We're going to relaunch it next fall. But I had written book 1 and 2, and then I had book 3 that I wanted to write, and I just wasn't motivated enough to really get into it. And so this challenge came up. My son told me about it because he's a writer too. He was like, "Hey, I just didn't know if you heard about this before." So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to do that. So I went ahead and I pre-planned for this. And this is what I would suggest is that when you get intentional about writing and you set yourself deadlines, set yourself up for success so that you will complete it. So what I did before November even hit, and let me know how you prepared for yours if you did this November challenge too. But I got really organized. I planned out all the plot lines for this novel. I knew what needed to be accomplished. I developed every character's profile. I knew what their character voice was like. I knew what they looked like in my head. I could picture them. I made a rough chapter summary for every single chapter. And this changed as I was writing. Like I said, sometimes that's going to change, but you got to have somewhere to start with. And another thing I did is I told my family that I was doing this challenge. And some of you want to be intentional, but there's nobody holding you accountable. So you need an accountability partner, or you need to at least tell your family, hey, for this certain amount of time, I'm going to get really intentional about writing, and I'm letting you know ahead of time that I'm going to get up really early, or I'm going to spend this extra block here. That's my writing time. Another thing that's good about that is they can cheer you on in the process and they can help hold you accountable. Hey, did you get your words in today? And maybe just even somebody asking you that if you wrote, but maybe you're shy a couple hundred words, it might help you go back and say, I'm almost there, but maybe I can spend a few more minutes and get my word count in for the day or for the week. So I told my family about that. And then I also had a word count goal. I knew how many words I had to write every day. I knew how many words I had to write at the end of the week in order to get 50,000 words in by the end of the month. And I think it was like the day before. November has 30 days anyway, so we're missing one day. But I think I got it done on like November 28th or 29th. And I was so excited, so proud of myself that I had done this challenge. And of course it was rough, and 50,000 words for a novel is not very many. So I had the bones, but it gave me like this sense of like accomplishment when you know that you're finishing your goal and you're keeping yourself accountable, you have a deadline, and that is super, super helpful. All that preparation meant that when it was time to write, I could just write and I didn't have to do all of that preparation while I was trying to be in the process. So it's not that I was not being creative. I think I was even being more creative because I had given that creativity somewhere to go. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, I am seeing this all the time with authors. Every week we have authors submitting manuscripts to us. I have so many clients now that are using AI more than they should to help them with their manuscript. So being intentional about writing also means resisting the temptation to just let AI do all the hard work for you. So I'm going to warn you, do not outsource your authorship to AI. And there's many, many different reasons for this. I don't have time to do a whole video on this. I could talk about it for days. So AI can be a helpful tool, but you should never start using it as a crutch for writing. So let me say that again. It can be a helpful tool. Okay. Use tools, but don't let it just write your whole book for you. You might use it to help organize a collection of thoughts, develop some questions you should consider, suggest a few different ways to reword something. Like if you're having a hard time, like getting a sentence to flow, you can get AI to give you some like options, and it might give you spark creativity to be able to word it better. But we never recommend turning your whole manuscript over to AI, letting it write it for you. Don't just throw your notes in there and think that it's going to come out with a book that's in your voice, that has all of your own values reflected in it, and also is going to say things the way that you would have said it, because it's not. And I would not even suggest letting it heavily edit or rewrite sections of your manuscript. Now, I've used it to get ideas for places that I didn't know how I should frame like an interaction between a couple of characters, but I never just pop that in and just leave it there. I always am taking the suggestion as like, okay, this is somebody giving me a suggestion about how this should go, but I need to put that in my own voice, in my own words. One thing you need to be aware of is that AI has a certain way that it writes things. It has a certain way that it phrases things. And it's super obvious to someone who is working with books all the time and they're working with authors all the time, especially like if I have worked with a client before and know how they write and I've read their other books. And then all of a sudden they submit me a book that they've used AI to write big portions of it or to re-edit things, it's really, really obvious that it's not them. And if it's obvious to me, it's going to be obvious to your readers if they have followed your books and and maybe even your first time author, but those people know how you talk if they're friends of yours. And even if you tell AI and you load it with prompts and things like that, and you tell it to imitate your voice, it's still imitating you. It doesn't have your experiences. It doesn't have your convictions, your creativity, your unique way of seeing the world. So maybe there's places where you would have written something way better because you have that own creativity in your mind and you're not just having a robot spit it out for you. Specifically for Christian authors, let me tell you, AI is not going to write with the anointing of God that breaks the yokes and breaks the chains. AI is a machine. It's a robot. It does not have the anointing on it. It might be able to be used to arrange biblical sounding words, but it cannot replace the message, the creativity that God put inside of you. So do not use it to just really write your book for you. God put that message in your heart and your mind. Use it as a tool, but don't use it as a crutch. I would say even like younger readers in the 20s, they're becoming very, very familiar with the way that AI spits out repetitive phrases, predictable rhythms, polished language, but it's like hollow. You know what I'm talking about? That it sounds really good, but it's empty. It's the generated AI writing. And so those younger generation readers, they're going to recognize it really quickly. And you don't want someone to put your book down and discount your whole message because you used AI in the process and you depended on it too much. So don't sacrifice the authenticity of your book just because you want to take a shortcut. So to wrap things up, good books don't happen by accident. You have to be intentional about it. When you look at books that have made a lasting impact, think of your favorite book, the one that changed your life the most. You're going to usually find that someone developed that book very purposely. The author thought really carefully about their message. They thought about you as the reader, and they said, how is this information going to change their life? How can I best write this to where it's going to impact them? And then they were very intentional about how they developed that book. So as a writer, it's your job to know your reader, to know your destination, to build a structure, give yourself deadlines, save those unrelated ideas for later, and protect your authentic voice. Write with freedom, but build your book intentionally. And so I would love to know in the comments, did you bring in with an outline? Did you write your book with any kind of organizational structure? Or maybe you didn't use any structure and you noticed later on that it was hurting your book. Let me know in the comments. Let's talk about this. And if this video has been helpful, make sure you push the like, make sure you subscribe, and share it with another writer who's in the process. Maybe it'll help them too. But thanks for watching, and God bless.